We've had polling out in recent days, including the latest New York Times Siena poll that seems to suggest the momentum may be stalling. So how does she try to rev it back up tonight?
Yeah, well, she's looking for one of those sort of social moments. This is the transition from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris on the Democratic ticket has been remarkable in a lot of ways. But one of the ways is that that Harris is a lot more adept, or at least their team is, at taking these differences between the candidates, these moments that can capture the public imagination, especially among younger voters, millennials, Gen Z voters. So she's going to be looking for moments in this debate that can be clipped into little TikTok videos or Instagram reels or whatever format it is to sort of really highlight the difference between the two candidates. She's been preparing. I'm sure she's been doing mock debates. That's something that Trump famously does not do. But she is the less experienced debater here. If she's elected, she will have been elected having fewer presidential debates than any candidate in history. Trump, on the other hand, this is his 7th. He's done more presidential debates than any other candidate in history. Big difference in experience here.
Pretty remarkable. As I guess everyone's reaching for a moment then tonight, to your point. It's not just who's watching live, but what gets captured on social media when things are clipped up 24 hours from now. To that end, remembering the first debate, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, everyone thinks back to that, and all they think of is the age issue. Does Kamala Harris bring up the age issue to turn the tables against Donald Trump tonight?
Well, obviously, we'll have to wait and see. But I think her plan is to kind of go in and stay on message, to talk directly to the American people about what her plans are. Try not to get drawn into Trump's game. Trump is a master at trying to draw wedges between candidates and their constituencies, to try to throw people off. She has a plan. As Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And that's, frankly, what happened to Joe Biden back in June when he got hit a couple of times and never fully recovered. So she's going to try not to take those punches, obviously, or at least be able to roll with them and stay on message.
Bloomberg's Gregory Korte. Thank you, Gregory. Will be watching along with us, as will our Trump whisperer, as we turn to what the Trump camp is focused on tonight. Bloomberg's Nancy Cook is with us at the table as well. Nancy, you're going to be helping us analyze what we hear tonight when the whole debate is done. But in terms of preparation, as Gregory said, two very different approaches here. And the conventional wisdom is that this is an exercise in self-discipline for Donald Trump, that if he simply does what his campaign advisors tell him, he can win this debate. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. His advisors really want him to focus on the state of the economy, inflation, immigration, and what they consider to be chaos in foreign policy. The withdrawal with Afghanistan, what is happening between Israel and Gaza. Those are really the themes that they want him to hit. Trump, though, behind closed doors, has a lot of contempt for Vice President Kamala Harris. He has gone after her with very personal attacks on her race and her gender. He doesn't think she's intelligent. And so what I will be looking for is, does he stick to that sort of policy argument where voters do overwhelmingly trust him, particularly to handle the economy? Does he stick to sort of that line, or does he veer into these more personal attacks? My money is on the more personal attacks. I think that he thinks they're effective, even if his advisors don't like him.
Well, and considering the demographic changes we're seeing now that Harris is at the top of the ticket instead of Biden, specifically with women, do you have insight into how his campaign is suggesting he conduct himself as he's debating a woman of color who is on that stage at the other podium?
What is interesting is that the polling with the Trump campaign has remained remarkably consistent. Republicans have lost a ton of ground with suburban women voters since the federal right to an abortion was overturned. And what they have been trying to do to make up for that deficit is to go after black voters, particularly black men, and the huge number of Latino voters in the country. And those are the groups that they are still going to continue to target, along with white working class people, with senior citizens where they've had, people over the age of 65 are still supporting Trump. Those are the groups that they are really going to go after with this debate.
I heard an interview earlier today with Lanny Davis, the former Clinton White House counsel, went on to represent the Donald Trump's fixer in the hush money trial, Michael Cohen. He said that Kamala Harris's job tonight is to be herself. The best strategy to win, the best strategy for Donald Trump is to not be himself. Is there some truth there based on what you just said?
I think the best strategy is for him to really stick to a message, which has never been his appeal, right? Part of his appeal is that he doesn't seem like a politician who sticks to the message. He seems like a politician who's authentic and talks off the cuff, and that's why his supporters like him. But in order for him to win in November, he has to build out the Republican coalition, and that includes appealing to people who may not see themselves as Republicans or who maybe didn't vote for him in the past. And so he has to appeal to a broader set of people. And for Harris, voters still don't know a ton about her. The majority of people still don't know a ton about her biography, her record. So for her, the debate is really the best chance for her on her own terms to introduce herself to Americans.